Hi, I'm Jim Gehring from Brown Tool Auctions. I'm here today to share with you some of the interesting tools that we have listed in our fall auction. It'll be held on October 30th in Camp Hill, Pennsylvania. What I have here now are 5 examples of a tool called a saw set. Now, if you take a saw, an ordinary wood cutting saw, and look down the length of the blade, you should notice that each tooth in the blade is slightly bent outwards, and they go opposite ways. You know, the first tooth bent one way, the next tooth bent the other way. This is called the set of the saw. It is necessary in order that the saw will cut cleanly and won't get all clogged up with wood chips, with sawdust, as it would if every tooth was exactly in line. So if you're going to sharpen a saw properly, if you're going to tune the saw properly, you have to not only sharpen it, but then you have to set it, which basically means taking every single tooth in the saw and bending it first one way and then the other way. And ideally, you want to have it each one at exactly the same angle so you get a nice clean cut. It's obviously a very tedious and time-consuming process. And it's not surprising that during the great age of invention, back during the 1800s, people came up with a lot of different ways to try and make this process a little more efficient. And as a result, there are probably dozens of patented saw sets that were invented and patented during the 1800s until eventually people settled on one or two actual working methods which then came to dominate the market. So we have an entire collection from a guy who collected saw sets in this auction, and I've got 5 of them here to show you. This one is actually the very earliest saw set patent. It was patented by 3 guys from Vermont. It's called the Waste, Millington, and Hutchins patent, 3 guys who invented it. And it kind of set the general pattern for what are called plier type sets. What you do is, in order to set the exact angle that you want each one of your teeth to be set at, you will set this. That will dictate the angle at which the saw blade goes into the pliers and gets held out there. And then when you push it down, this little piece here bends the saw blade. And since the saw will always be held at the same angle by the screw, every tooth should be bent at exactly the same angle. So you go through once, do every other tooth, flip it over, go through again, do every other tooth, and you got your set. This is a fairly simple mechanism. Like I said, it's the first one, which then set the pattern for most of the other types of saw sets that were patented during the rest of the century. Here's one that's much more complicated. Obviously, they went on from here to get more complicated. This was also by another guy from Vermont, a guy named Parker. And he's got this spring here to hold the saw in position. And you use these 2 different screws to get the angle exactly right. Push it down. You got a little hammer thing there. It pushes down on each blade. Again, you got to go through one way, flip it over, go through, do all the others the opposite way. So this guy named Nash, who was from Connecticut, he tried to solve that problem by having 2 different screws to set the angle of the saw. You want to set these 2 screws to exactly the same angle. You run your blade through here, go first one way and then the other. That way you've got to do all your setting in one pass. You don't have to pull it out and redo it. So a little bit of a variation on this basic concept here. Besides the pliers type sets, the other major type set is called the hammer type. And in a hammer type, instead of using the handle of the pliers to twist the teeth of the saw, you would rest them on an iron bed here, and then you have this little thing here, and you go down the length of the saw. You put it in this clamp, go down the length of the saw, rest this little hammer thing on each tooth, actually every other tooth, hit it with a hammer. And then that would bend the tooth down, and the angle of the bed here would dictate then the angle at which the saw was set. And again, with this one, after you go down, do every other tooth, you gotta pull it out, turn it over, go down, do the other tooth, going the opposite direction. That's a hammer type set, which is the other basic type of set besides the pliers type. Then the third type is called a rest. This is actually the oldest type. These go back to practically prehistoric times. And in here, you've got a little slot. You go down and you just bend the teeth like this. It's much simpler than either of these types. And you'll find these in all kinds of different sizes. This is actually a pretty large one. This was probably intended for like a big logging saw or a bandsaw or something. As you can see, you got pretty wide teeth there. This particular one was made by the Henry Diston Company, which was the dominant firm in the manufacture of saws throughout the 1800s. So again, this one doesn't have any particular patent. This basic design, goes back before the age of patents. But it's the other major type of saw set. These 5 sets, as well as probably about 8 or 10 others, are all going to be listed in the auction on October 30th.